The corridors of the Imperial Palace ship stretched endlessly before Tae-sung, empty and silent in the deep hours of the night. His cleaning cart squeaked slightly as he pushed it along the polished metal floors, the only sound breaking the quiet. He had been working this shift for 3 months now, and the loneliness no longer bothered him. In fact, he preferred it this way. No sneering alien nobles looking down at him. No supervisors watching his every move. Just him, his cart, and miles of floors to clean. Tae-sung was 28 years old, though he felt much older. Life as a human in the Galactic Council was not easy. His people were considered the newest species, the most primitive, the least important. Humans did the jobs nobody else wanted. They cleaned, they sorted waste, they worked in dangerous mines. Tae-sung had come to the Vrexian Empire hoping for something better, but he ended up with a mop and bucket instead. The Imperial Palace ship was enormous, the size of a small moon. It housed the Vrexian Emperor and his entire court. Tae-sung had never seen the Emperor, of course. Humans were not allowed in the presence of royalty. He worked in the restricted Imperial wing, but only at night when everyone important was asleep. His supervisor, Da-un, had made the rules very clear on his first day. Clean the corridors. Do not touch anything else. Never ever enter any of the sealed rooms, especially not the menagerie. Tae-sung did not even know what a menagerie was at first. Da-un explained it was a place where the Emperor kept exotic animals from across the galaxy. Rare creatures, dangerous creatures, valuable creatures. The doors were sealed with locks that would trigger alarms if opened. Tae-sung had no interest in causing trouble. He needed this job. He sent half his pay back to his family on Earth every month. Tonight felt different somehow. Tae-sung could not explain it, but something in the air seemed off. He pushed his cart down the familiar corridor, past the tall windows showing the stars outside, past the golden statues of ancient Vrexian warriors. He was approaching the menagerie section when he heard it. A sound, soft and distant. Like crying, Tae-sung stopped walking. He listened carefully. There it was again. A whimpering sound, high-pitched and desperate. It was coming from behind the sealed menagerie door. He should keep walking.
He knew he should.
Da-un's warning echoed in his mind. Never open those doors. Never investigate unusual sounds. The palace had security systems, automated caretakers, trained keepers. Whatever was making that noise, it was not his problem. Tae-sung gripped the handle of his mop and started to push his cart forward. The whimpering came again, louder this time. More desperate. It sounded like something was in pain. He stopped again. His hands tightened on the cart handle. Just keep walking, he told himself. It is not your responsibility. You are just a cleaner. You have no authority here. If you get caught opening that door, they will fire you. Or worse. The whimpering turned into a weak, broken cry. Tae-sung closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He thought about his mother back on Earth, about his younger sister who was counting on his money for her education. He thought about the small room he shared with 3 other human workers. He thought about how hard he had worked to get even this terrible job. Then he thought about the sound of something suffering. Alone in the dark while everyone who should care walked away. He left his cart in the hallway and approached the menagerie door. The lock was electronic, but it was an old model. It was designed to keep animals inside, not to keep people out. Tae-sung had worked in maintenance before becoming a cleaner. He knew systems like this. He pulled a small tool from his pocket, something he used to fix his cart when it broke down. Within 2 minutes, the lock clicked open. The door slid aside with a soft hiss. Tae-sung stepped into darkness. Emergency lights flickered weakly along the walls, barely providing enough light to see. The menagerie was larger than he expected, with different sections for different creatures. Most of the chambers were empty or dark. He followed the sound of whimpering to the back corner of the room. What he found made his breath catch in his throat. A small creature was trapped under a fallen piece of equipment. The creature looked like something from ancient Earth legends, like the dragons in old picture books. It had scales that shimmered even in the dim light, small wings folded against its body, and a long tail that twitched weakly. It was about the size of a large cat, maybe slightly bigger. One of its wings was bent at a wrong angle, and there was blood on its scales. The creature saw Tae-sung and tried to scramble away, but it was pinned. It opened its mouth and tried to breathe fire at him, but only a few small sparks came out. The creature was terrified. Tae-sung held up his hand slowly. "It is okay," he said softly in Korean. knowing the creature could not understand his words but hoping his tone would help. "I am not going to hurt you. I want to help." He looked around the chamber. The place was a mess. Water dispensers were empty. Food containers held only moldy scraps. The automated care systems on the walls were all blinking red with error messages. This creature had been forgotten, neglected, left to die. Anger flashed through Tae-sung, hot and sudden. What kind of people kept a living creature like this? What kind of empire let something helpless suffer? He pushed the anger down and focused on the problem. The equipment that had fallen was heavy, but he managed to lift it enough to pull the creature free. The small dragon whimpered and tried to bite him, but it was too weak. Tae-sung carefully examined the injured wing. He was not a doctor, but he had taken basic first aid training. The wing was not broken, just badly bruised and twisted. He took off his work jacket and wrapped the creature gently in it. The dragon stopped struggling and looked up at him with large, intelligent eyes. Eyes that seemed far too aware, far too understanding for a simple animal. Tae-sung looked around for medical supplies and found a cabinet on the wall. Inside were bandages and healing ointments, though most were expired. He did the best he could, cleaning the wounds and wrapping the injured wing carefully. The creature watched him the entire time, its fear slowly fading. When he checked the food dispensers, he found they had been empty for days. The water system had completely failed. This creature had been dying of thirst and starvation. Tae-sung felt his throat tighten. He opened his lunch container, the simple rice and vegetables he had brought for his break, and offered some to the creature. The dragon sniffed it carefully, then ate with desperate hunger. Tae-sung gave it all his food, every last bit. Then he fixed the water dispenser using parts from a broken one in another chamber. Clean water flowed out and the creature drank like it had been dying of thirst, because it had been. Hours passed. Tae-sung stayed with the creature, talking to it softly, making sure it was comfortable. The dragon slowly relaxed, its breathing becoming steadier. Eventually, it crawled closer to Tae-sung and curled up against his chest, seeking warmth. Tae-sung carefully stroked the scales on its head. They were warm and surprisingly smooth. The creature made a sound, not quite a purr, but close to it. Something content. Something grateful. Through the large windows, Tae-sung could see the darkness outside beginning to fade. Dawn was coming. The day shift would arrive soon. The court would wake up. He needed to leave before anyone discovered what he had done. But as he looked down at the small dragon sleeping peacefully against him, Tae-sung made a decision. He would come back tomorrow night. And the night after that, he would keep coming back until this creature was healthy and safe. He did not know that the Emperor had been away on a military campaign for weeks. He did not know that the Emperor was returning today. He did not know that this small dragon was the most precious possession of the most powerful being in the Empire. All Tae-sung knew was that something had needed help, and he had given it. That seemed like enough. Tae-sung returned to his quarters just as the morning shift was beginning. He shared a small room with 3 other human workers, all of them cleaners or maintenance staff. His roommate, a man named Jae-ho, was already awake and getting ready for his day shift. "You look terrible," Jae-ho said, studying Tae-sung's face. "Rough night?" Tae-sung forced a smile. "Just tired." Long shift. He cleaned up quickly and fell into his narrow bed, but sleep would not come. He kept thinking about the small dragon, alone in that neglected chamber. What if someone checked on it today? What if they realized someone had been inside? His supervisor, Da-eun, was sharp. She noticed everything. Sure enough, 3 hours later, someone was shaking him awake. Da-eun stood over his bed, her arms crossed and her expression serious. "Tae-sung, why did your shift last 2 hours longer than usual? The time logs show you clocking out late." Tae-sung's mind raced. There was a spill in one of the restricted corridors. Some kind of cleaning fluid had leaked. I had to take care of it properly before anyone walked through in the morning. Da-eun studied his face for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. "Next time, report it to me immediately. I need to know about any issues in real time." "Yes, supervisor." After she left, Tae-sung let out a breath he did not know he was holding. That was close. Too close. What Tae-sung did not know was that someone else had already discovered what he had done. In the Imperial Palace, High Chancellor Drextor was conducting his morning inspection of the restricted areas. He was a tall, imposing Vrexian with dark scales and cold eyes. He had served the Emperor for decades and took his duties very seriously. When he reached the menagerie section, he noticed immediately that the door had been opened during the night. "Security breach," he announced to his assistants. "Pull the footage from last night now." Within minutes, they were watching the recordings. Drextor's eyes narrowed as he saw a human cleaner approach the door, open it, and enter. A human in the Imperial menagerie, touching the Emperor's property. "Arrest him immediately," Drextor ordered. "Bring him to the detention level. I want him questioned about what he stole." But before the guards could move, another voice interrupted. "Wait." Keeper Silvara entered the room. She was responsible for the menagerie, though she rarely visited it anymore. She was a female Vrexian with lighter scales and a nervous manner. "Let me see the footage first." "All of it." Drextor frowned but allowed it. They watched together as Taesung freed the small dragon, bandaged its wounds, fed it his own food, and stayed with it for hours. They saw the gentleness in his movements, the care he took. They saw him fix the water system and clean the chamber. Silvara's expression changed from confusion to shock to something like shame. "That is Pyrex," she said quietly. "The cursed one?" Drextor asked. Silvara nodded. "The last of the star dragons. The Emperor rescued it as an egg years ago, but everyone who tries to care for it suffers accidents. 3 keepers have died or been seriously injured. We believe the creature brings misfortune to anyone but its chosen master. Since the Emperor could never form a bond with it, most of the court thinks it should be destroyed." "And you have been avoiding it," Drextor said, his voice flat. "Yes," Silvara admitted. "I was afraid. The automated systems were supposed to handle its care. I did not realize they had failed." She looked at the screen where Taesung was gently stroking the sleeping dragon. "This human saved Pyrex's life. If he had not entered that room, the creature would have died." Drextor's face was unreadable. "The Emperor returns today. He will want to see Pyrex immediately. What do we tell him?" Silvara thought for a moment. "Let me observe first. I want to see what happens next." That night, Taesung returned to the menagerie. His hands were shaking as he opened the door, half expecting security forces to be waiting inside. But the chamber was empty except for Pyrex. The moment the dragon saw him, it made a happy chirping sound and rushed over. Pyrex jumped up, trying to reach Taesung's arms, its tail wagging like an excited dog. Taesung could not help but smile. He picked up the dragon carefully, checking its wounds. They were healing much faster than he expected. "You are a tough one, are you not?" he said softly in Korean. He had brought better food this time. He had stolen extra portions from the staff cafeteria, hiding them in his jacket. Pyrex ate eagerly, making happy sounds between bites. After eating, the dragon followed Taesung around the chamber as he worked to properly clean and organize the space. Taesung talked to Pyrex while he worked, telling the dragon about his day, about Earth, about his family. Pyrex seemed to listen, tilting its head at certain words. When Taesung said his name, the dragon repeated the sound back or something close to it. It was trying to communicate. "You understand me, do you not?" Taesung asked, amazed. Pyrex chirped and nuzzled against his leg. As the hours passed, Taesung made more repairs to the chamber. He fixed broken feeding systems, cleaned out old nesting materials, and replaced them with clean blankets he found in a storage room. He even managed to get some of the environmental controls working again, bringing the temperature up to something more comfortable. When it was time to leave, Pyrex became distressed. The dragon grabbed onto Taesung's pant leg with its small claws, refusing to let go. It made sad, desperate sounds. "I have to go," Taesung said, gently kneeling down. "But I will come back tomorrow. I promise." Pyrex did not seem to understand or did not want to accept it. Taesung stayed an extra hour, just sitting with the dragon until it finally fell asleep. Only then did he carefully slip away. This pattern continued for a week. Every night Taesung returned. Every night Pyrex grew stronger, brighter, more energetic. The dragon's scales began to shine properly. Its movements became more confident. It could now breathe small streams of fire instead of just sparks. But stealing enough food for Pyrex was becoming difficult. Taesung was losing weight himself, giving most of his own meals to the dragon. One of his co-workers noticed. Haewon was a human medical technician who worked in the palace hospital. She was a few years older than Taesung and had always been kind to him. When she saw him pocketing extra food from the cafeteria one day, she pulled him aside. "Are you in trouble?" she asked quietly. "If you need help, you can tell me." Taesung wanted to say no to protect his secret, but he was exhausted from the double life he was leading. Working all night, caring for Pyrex, barely sleeping. He needed help. If I tell you something, will you promise not to report me? He asked. Haewon looked worried but nodded. I promise, so Taesung told her everything. About finding Pyrex, about the neglect, about his nightly visits. Haewon's eyes grew wider and wider as he spoke. Do you know what that creature is? She asked when he finished. Star dragons are legendary. They are supposed to be extinct. If the Emperor finds out you have been touching it, I know it is dangerous, Taesung said, but I cannot just abandon it now. It needs me. Haewon was quiet for a long moment. Then she sighed. You humans and your stupid compassion. Fine, I will help. But you need proper supplies, real food for exotic creatures, better medical equipment. How can we get those things? I am just a cleaner. Haewon smiled slightly. I work in medical. I have access to the veterinary supplies. We treat exotic animals sometimes when the regular keepers cannot handle them. I can get what you need. From that night on, Haewon helped Taesung care for Pyrex. She provided proper nutrition supplements, healing tools, and guidance on how to care for a growing star dragon. Under their combined care, Pyrex flourished even more. The dragon grew attached to Haewon too, though not in the same way as with Taesung. Pyrex would allow her to examine him and apply medicine, but when Taesung was in the room, the dragon only had eyes for him. It followed Taesung everywhere, made happy sounds when he arrived and became sad when he left. I have never seen anything like this, Haewon said one night, watching Pyrex curl up in Taesung's lap. Star dragons are supposed to be fierce and independent. This one acts like you are its parent. I just fed it and kept it safe, Taesung said, stroking Pyrex's scales. Anyone would have done the same. No, Haewon said seriously. Most people would have walked away. Most people did walk away. Unknown to both of them, Keeper Silvera had been watching through the security system every night. She saw everything. The bond forming between human and dragon, the dedication, the love, and she saw the Imperial fleet approaching the palace ship on her monitors. The Emperor was home. Silvara made her decision. She would tell Emperor Vralmoth everything. She would show him the footage. She would explain how a human cleaner had saved Pyrex's life. She did not know how the Emperor would react. He might be grateful. He might be furious that his treasure had been touched by a lowly human. Either way, Taesung's life was about to change forever. In the menagerie, Taesung held Pyrex close, completely unaware of what was coming. The dragon purred against his chest, content and happy. For now, that was all that mattered. The Imperial fleet arrived with great ceremony. Ships surrounded the palace vessel, their weapons gleaming in the starlight. Emperor Vralmoth's command ship docked first, and the entire court gathered to welcome him home. Taesung knew nothing about this. He was sleeping in his quarters, exhausted from another long night with Pyrex. The dragon had been unusually playful, and Taesung had stayed later than planned. He had barely gotten 3 hours of sleep when the alarm on his datapad went off. Time for his shift. He dragged himself out of bed, washed his face, and headed to the cleaning storage room to get his cart. Taeyun was there, and she looked tense. The Emperor has returned, she said to all the human workers gathered. Security will be extra tight today. Stay in your assigned areas. Do not go anywhere you are not supposed to be. Do not cause any problems. Understood? Everyone nodded. Taesung felt a chill run down his spine. The Emperor was back. That meant he would check on his precious dragon. That meant someone would discover what Taesung had been doing. He went through his day shift in a fog of anxiety. Every time he saw a security guard, he expected to be arrested. Every time someone looked at him, he thought they knew. But the hours passed and nothing happened, until it did. Taesung was cleaning a corridor when 4 Imperial guards appeared. They were massive Vrexian warriors in full armor, and they were walking directly toward him. You are Taesung? The lead guard asked. Yes, Taesung managed to say, his voice barely working. You will come with us. Now. They did not let him ask questions. They did not explain anything. They simply surrounded him and marched him through the palace. Other workers stared as they passed. Taesung saw Daun in the distance, her face pale with shock. He saw Haewon near the medical wing, her hand covering her mouth. They brought him to the throne room. Taesung had never been in this part of the palace. The throne room was enormous, with ceilings so high they disappeared into shadows. The walls were covered in precious metals and ancient weapons. At the far end of the room, on a platform raised above everyone else, sat the throne. and on that throne sat Emperor Vralmoth. The Emperor was terrifying. He stood at least 9 feet tall with dark crimson scales that looked like armor. His eyes glowed with an inner fire, and when he moved, the air itself seemed to ripple with power. He was ancient. Taesung could feel it just by looking at him. This being had lived for centuries, had commanded armies, had destroyed entire civilizations. The throne room was packed with courtiers and nobles, all dressed in elaborate robes. High Chancellor Drextor stood beside the throne, his expression cold and satisfied. This was an execution, Taesung realized. They had brought him here to execute him publicly. The guards forced Taesung to his knees in front of the throne. The floor was hard and cold beneath him. "You are the human who entered my menagerie without permission," Emperor Vralmoth said. His voice was deep and resonant, filling the entire chamber. "You touched my property. You violated the most sacred laws of this palace. Explain yourself before I pass judgment." Taesung's mind was blank with terror. He could barely breathe, let alone speak. But he forced the words out. The dragon was hurt. It was dying. No one was taking care of it. I heard it crying and I could not walk away. I am sorry for breaking the rules, but I could not let it suffer. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. You expect me to believe you acted out of compassion? A human? For a creature worth more than your entire species? I do not know about worth, Taesung said, his voice shaking. I just know it was in pain, and I could help. So I did. High Chancellor Drextor stepped forward. Your Majesty, this human clearly planned to steal Pyrex and sell it on the black market. Star dragons are priceless. He must have... I brought food from my own meals, Taesung interrupted, looking up at the Emperor. I spent my free time fixing the systems in the chamber. I did not take anything. I only gave. Silence. Drextor roared. You do not speak unless the Emperor commands it. But Emperor Vralmoth held up one massive hand and Drextor fell silent immediately. The Emperor stared at Taesung for a long moment, his glowing eyes unreadable. Bring me Pyrex, the Emperor said. I will see the condition of my dragon for myself. Keeper Silvara was waiting outside with a transport container. She carried it in carefully and placed it at the base of the throne platform. Through the transparent sides, Taesung could see Pyrex inside. Confused and frightened by all the noise and strange faces. The moment Pyrex caught Taesung's scent, everything changed. The dragon went wild. It started throwing itself against the container walls with unexpected strength. The container cracked. Pyrrhix's fire began to glow brighter and hotter than it should have been possible for such a young dragon. The container's locking mechanism melted under the heat. The lid burst open, and Pyrrhix shot out like an arrow. Every guard in the room reached for their weapons. Courtiers screamed and scattered. High Chancellor Drextor shouted orders. But Pyrrhix ignored them all. The dragon flew in a straight line across the throne room, over the heads of dozens of terrified nobles, and landed directly on Taesung's shoulder. Pyrrhix immediately curled around Taesung's neck, purring loudly and nuzzling against his cheek. The dragon's tail wrapped around Taesung's arm protectively. It made happy chirping sounds. The same sounds it made every night when Taesung arrived at the menagerie. The entire throne room fell completely silent. Taesung reached up instinctively to steady Pyrrhix, and the dragon pressed its head into his hand, demanding to be petted. Without thinking, Taesung scratched under Pyrrhix's chin, the way the dragon liked. Pyrrhix closed its eyes in contentment. Emperor Vralmoth rose slowly from his throne. He walked down the steps of the platform, each footstep echoing in the silent chamber. He approached Taesung and Pyrrhix, his massive form looming over them both. Pyrrhix opened its eyes and saw the Emperor approaching. The dragon's entire body went tense. A low growl rumbled from its throat and its scales began to heat up. Small flames flickered around its mouth. Pyrrhix was protecting Taesung from the Emperor. The Emperor stopped, shock clear on his reptilian face. Impossible, he whispered. Your Majesty, Keeper Silvara said nervously, stepping forward. I believe Pyrrhix has formed a bond with this human. A true bond. Star dragons only bond with their own kind, Drextor said sharply. This must be some trick. Some human technology or drug. But the Emperor was not listening. He was staring at Pyrrhix with an expression Taesung could not read. Slowly, carefully, the Emperor extended one clawed hand toward the dragon. Pyrrhix growled louder and breathed a small stream of fire. Not enough to hurt, but enough to warn. Stay away from my human. The Emperor pulled his hand back. For several long moments he simply stood there, looking at the small dragon protecting a human cleaner. Then he turned to his physician. "Examine Pyrex. Tell me its condition." The chief physician approached carefully, keeping his distance from Pyrex's protective position. He used scanning equipment to check the dragon from a safe distance. "Your Majesty," the physician said, confusion in his voice. "Pyrex is healthier than I have ever seen. The scales are properly developed. The fire sac is functioning correctly. The wings are strong and flexible. The previous injuries have healed completely. This dragon should not be this healthy for at least another year of growth. How long has it been like this?" the Emperor asked. The physician checked his records. The last scan was 3 weeks ago. Pyrex was malnourished, injured, and showing signs of severe depression. The prognosis was poor. I expected it to die within a month. The Emperor turned to Keeper Silvara. "Show me the security footage." All of it. They brought up holographic displays in the throne room. Everyone watched as the recordings played. They saw Taesung discover Pyrex trapped and injured. They saw him free the dragon, bandage its wounds, feed it his own food. They saw him return night after night, bringing supplies, fixing equipment, staying for hours just to keep the dragon company. They watched Taesung talk to Pyrex in a strange language, probably his human tongue. They saw him singing soft songs to help the dragon sleep. They watched him sacrifice his own comfort, his own food, his own rest, all for a creature he had no obligation to help. When the recordings finished, many of the courtiers were staring at Taesung with new expressions. Not all friendly, but different than before. Less dismissive. More confused. Emperor Vralmoth watched the final scene, where Taesung sat on the floor of the menagerie with Pyrex curled in his lap, both of them sleeping peacefully. The Emperor's eyes were distant, as if he was remembering something from long ago. "Why did you keep returning?" the Emperor asked quietly. "After the first night, you had fulfilled any moral obligation. You saved its life. Why risk your job, your freedom, your life to keep coming back?" Taesung looked up at the massive Emperor, still kneeling on the floor with Pyrex on his shoulder. He answered with simple honesty, "Because Pyrex needed me." The Emperor stared at him for a long moment. Then, to everyone's shock, the ancient ruler's expression softened. "Do you know what a bond is, human?" "No, Your Majesty." Star dragons bond with one being in their lifetime. One companion. One guardian. One friend. The bond is absolute and cannot be broken. The dragon will live for that being, fight for that being, die for that being. In return, the chosen one becomes responsible for the dragon's well-being for the rest of their lives. The Emperor's voice became heavy. Taesung's new quarters were larger than the entire room he used to share with 3 other workers. He had a bedroom, a sitting area, and a door that connected directly to a newly renovated habitat for Pyrex. The habitat had proper temperature controls, comfortable nesting areas, and everything a growing star dragon could need. The servants who brought him there bowed as they left. Actually bowed to him, a human who had been cleaning floors just yesterday. Taesung sat on the edge of the large bed and tried to understand what had happened. His hands were shaking. Pyrex climbed into his lap, concerned by his distress, and made questioning sounds. "I am okay," Taesung said softly, stroking the dragon's scales. "Just confused." And scared. Very scared. There was a knock at the door. Taesung opened it to find Da-un standing there, looking uncomfortable in the fancy corridor. "May I come in?" she asked. Taesung nodded and stepped aside. Da-un entered slowly, staring around at the luxurious quarters. When she saw Taesung, her expression was complicated. "I thought they were going to execute you," she said quietly. "When the guards took you away, I thought I would never see you again." "I thought so too." Da-un looked at Pyrex, who was watching her suspiciously from Taesung's arms. "You risked everything for that creature. Why?" "It needed help," Taesung said simply. Da-un shook her head. "You humans, always helping things that cannot help you back. It is going to get you killed one day." But there was something almost like pride in her voice. "The court will not accept you easily. They see this as an insult. A human in an imperial position. Watch your back, Taesung." After she left, Taesung realized how alone he was now. He was not part of the cleaning crew anymore. But he was not part of the court either. He existed in a strange space between worlds belonging to neither. The next few days were difficult. Taesung was given fine clothes that felt wrong on his body. He was served food by servants who looked at him with barely hidden contempt. He attended palace functions because Pyrrhix was expected to be there, and where Pyrrhix went, Taesung had to go. The nobles ignored him when they could. When they could not ignore him, they made cutting remarks just loud enough for him to hear. The pet keeper. The emperor's charity case. Imagine a human touching imperial property. High Chancellor Drextor was the worst. He watched Taesung constantly, waiting for mistakes. During one court dinner, Taesung used the wrong fork for his meal. Drextor announced it loudly to the entire table, embarrassing him in front of dozens of nobles. "Perhaps we should provide the human with eating instructions," Drextor said with a cold smile, "along with basic etiquette lessons. We would not want him to embarrass the emperor further." Taesung kept his eyes on his plate and said nothing. Pyrrhix, however, growled from his perch on Taesung's shoulder and breathed a small puff of smoke in Drextor's direction. The High Chancellor's smile faded. The only bright spot was Haewon. She was allowed to visit him because Pyrrhix sometimes needed medical attention. She brought news from the human workers and reminded Taesung that he was not completely alone. "They are calling you a hero in the human quarters," Haewon said one evening while checking Pyrrhix's growth rate. "The human who stood up to the emperor and lived. Some are even saying you will change things for our people." "I just wanted to help a hurt animal," Taesung said tiredly. "I did not mean to change anything." "Too late," Haewon said. "You already have." She was right. Slowly, Taesung noticed changes. Human workers were being treated slightly better by some of the staff. Not much, not everywhere, but it was something. His existence in the Imperial Wing was proving that humans could be trusted with important responsibilities. But it also made him a target. Taesung began to notice strange things. Equipment in Pyrrhix's habitat would malfunction in dangerous ways. Food deliveries would be delayed or contain spoiled items. Once he found a broken window in the habitat that let in freezing air from outside the ship. If Pyrrhix had been a normal dragon, it would have become sick. He reported these incidents, but they were always dismissed as accidents. No one could prove sabotage. Then the incidents became more serious. One night, Taesung was working in the habitat, adjusting the temperature controls. Pyrrhix was napping in his nest, content and warm. Suddenly, all the lights went out. Emergency lighting did not activate. The habitat was plunged into complete darkness. Taesung heard a sound. Something moving in the dark. Something that was not Pyrrhix, who is there. He called out. A hiss answered him. Long and venomous. Taesung's blood went cold. He knew that sound. During his training, he had been warned about certain creatures kept in the palace menagerie. Creatures that were extremely dangerous. Pyrrhix woke with a frightened cry, sensing the threat. The dragon's scales began to glow faintly, providing just enough light to see. What Taesung saw made him freeze. A serpent beast as long as 3 men lying end to end was coiled in the corner of the habitat. Its scales were midnight black and its eyes glowed yellow in the darkness. Venom dripped from its fangs, sizzling when it hit the floor. This was not an accident. Someone had released this creature here. Someone wanted Pyrrhix dead. The serpent beast struck faster than Taesung could react. It lunged at Pyrrhix, jaws open wide, fangs extended. Taesung did not think. He threw himself between the serpent and the dragon. The creature's body slammed into him, knocking him across the room. Pain exploded in his shoulder where one of the fangs grazed him. Not a full bite, but enough. The venom began to burn immediately. Taesung grabbed the nearest thing he could find, a metal pole used for cleaning the high windows. It was not much of a weapon, but it was all he had. The serpent beast turned its attention to him now, sensing easier prey than the dragon. Pyrrhix was screaming, breathing fire wildly in panic. The flames were not controlled enough to help, and they might hurt Taesung by accident. "Stay back!" Taesung shouted at the dragon in Korean. "Stay in your nest." The serpent beast lunged again. Taesung swung the pole, hitting the creature's side. It barely slowed down. The serpent coiled around him, beginning to squeeze. Taesung could not breathe. His ribs felt like they were cracking. Through the pain and lack of air, Taesung saw the serpent's head rising up for a killing strike. This was it. This was how he died. Then Pyrrhix did something unexpected. The dragon stopped panicking. Its eyes focused with sudden, sharp intelligence. Pyrrhix breathed in deeply, and this time the fire that came out was different. It was concentrated, controlled, hot enough to make the air shimmer. The stream of fire hit the serpent beast directly in the face. The creature shrieked and released Taesung, writhing in pain. Taesung fell to the floor, gasping for air. His vision was blurry from the venom, his body screaming in pain. But he saw his chance. The broken pole had a sharp, jagged end. As the serpent beast thrashed, temporarily blinded by Pyrex's fire, Taesung grabbed the pole and drove it with all his remaining strength into the creature's throat. The serpent beast convulsed once, twice, then went still. Taesung collapsed beside it. He could hear Pyrex crying, could feel the dragon trying to reach him, but his body would not move. The venom was spreading. His shoulder was on fire, and his breathing was becoming shallow. The last thing he saw before passing out was the door bursting open, and Emperor Vralmoth's massive form filling the doorway. When Taesung woke up, he was in the medical wing. His entire body ached, but he was alive. The first thing he saw was Pyrex curled up on the bed beside him, refusing to leave. The dragon looked up when Taesung's eyes opened and made a happy, relieved sound. The second thing he saw was Emperor Vralmoth standing by the window, looking out at the stars. The serpent beast was released deliberately, the Emperor said without turning around. The habitat locks were overridden from inside the palace systems. Someone with security access did this. Taesung's throat was dry. Who? I am investigating. The Emperor finally turned to look at him. You nearly died protecting Pyrex. The physician said you threw yourself in front of the creature without hesitation. Why? Pyrex is my responsibility, Taesung said simply. You said so yourself. The Emperor studied him for a long moment. I had a star dragon once, centuries ago. Its name was Kairos. We bonded when I was young before I became Emperor. Kairos was my closest friend, my companion, my guardian. We fought together in countless battles. The Emperor's voice became heavy with old grief. During a war with a rival empire, I was captured. They tortured me for information. Kairos came to rescue me alone. It fought through an entire army to reach me. By the time it found me, Kairos was dying from 100 wounds. But it still managed to free me and carry me to safety. The Emperor's clawed hand clenched. Kairos died in my arms, asking me with its last breath if I was safe. I had lived for 200 years at that point, commanded armies, conquered worlds. But I had never understood what true loyalty meant until that moment. True loyalty is not obedience. It is choosing to stand between death and the one you protect, even when running would be easier. He looked at Taesung with something like respect. You have that loyalty. A human cleaner has what most of my noble courtiers lack. Perhaps that is why Pyrex chose you. Over the next few days, as Taesung recovered, things began to change. Word spread of what happened, of how Taesung had fought a creature designed to kill dragons armed with nothing but... The arrest happened during a morning court session. Imperial guards surrounded High Chancellor Drextor while he was giving a report to the Emperor. The entire court fell silent as the guards placed restraints on his wrists. What is the meaning of this? Drextor demanded, his voice shaking with rage and fear. Emperor Vralmoth stood from his throne, his expression cold as ice. You are charged with attempted murder of imperial property and conspiracy against the throne. Security investigations have traced the serpent beast release to your private access codes. You will be interrogated and face trial. Drextor's face twisted with hatred. He looked directly at Taesung, who was standing near the Emperor's platform with Pyrex on his shoulder. This is because of that human. You have become weak, my Emperor. You shame our entire species by elevating these primitive creatures. Remove him, the Emperor commanded. As the guards dragged Drextor away, he screamed back at the court. You are all blind. The humans will destroy us. They always do. My family learned that truth centuries ago. The doors closed, cutting off his words. The court was left in shocked silence. Emperor Vralmoth addressed the gathering. Anyone else who shares Drextor's views may leave my service now. I will not tolerate prejudice in my court. The human Taesung has proven his worth through action and sacrifice. That is more than most of you have done. The nobles said nothing, but Taesung could feel their eyes on him. Some looked angry. Some looked thoughtful. A few looked almost guilty. After the court session, the Emperor summoned Taesung to his private chambers. This was unusual. The Emperor's personal rooms were restricted to only his closest advisors. Sit, the Emperor said, gesturing to a chair. Taesung sat carefully with Pyrex settling in his lap. The Emperor poured 2 glasses of something that glowed faintly blue. It is safe for humans. I checked. They drank in silence for a moment. Then Taesung gathered his courage. Your Majesty, I found something in the ancient texts. Something about star dragons and humans. He showed the Emperor the text he had discovered, explaining about the coordinates matching Earth's location. The Emperor read carefully, his glowing eyes moving across the ancient words. "I know this text," the Emperor said quietly. "I read it years ago when I was researching star dragons, hoping to understand why Pyrex would not bond with me. But I dismissed it as legend. The coordinates seemed random. I did not know they matched your homeworld." "What if it is not legend?" Taesung asked. "What if star dragons and humans have always been connected somehow? What if that is why Pyrex chose me?" The Emperor was quiet for a long time, thinking. If this is true, the implications are enormous. Humans would not be newcomers to the galaxy. They would be the ancient companions of the most powerful species ever known. This would change everything about how humans are treated in the Council. "Should we tell people?" Taesung asked. "Not yet," the Emperor decided. "We need more proof, but we should investigate further. I will assign scholars to research this connection." Quietly. But the secret did not stay secret for long. 3 days later, Taesung was working with Pyrex in the habitat when alarms suddenly blared throughout the palace ship. Emergency lights flashed. Through the windows he could see explosions on some of the outer sections of the ship. The door to the habitat burst open. Palace guards rushed in. "You need to come with us now. The ship is under attack." Attack by who? Extremists. Nobles who follow Drextor's beliefs. They are trying to take control of the palace. They have already seized the docking bays. The lead guard looked uncomfortable. They are demanding that all humans be expelled from the ship. And they want Pyrex destroyed. They are calling the dragon a curse that has corrupted the Emperor. Taesung felt ice in his veins. Pyrex sensed his fear and growled, flames flickering around the dragon's mouth. Pyrex had grown significantly over the past weeks. The dragon was now the size of a large dog with powerful wings and sharp claws. "Where is the Emperor?" Taesung asked, fighting on the command deck. "He sent us to protect you and Pyrex. We need to get you to the safe room." They rushed through the corridors. Taesung could hear weapons fire in the distance. They passed wounded guards being carried to medical. The palace was in chaos. They were almost to the safe room when attackers appeared at the end of the corridor. A group of armed nobles in combat armor, led by a Vrexian general Taesung had seen at court dinners. The general had always looked at him with disgust. "There is the human and the cursed dragon," the general shouted. "Kill them both!" The palace guards with Taesung moved to defend him, but they were outnumbered. Weapons fire filled the corridor. Taesung pressed himself against the wall, shielding Pyrex with his body. He could feel the dragon's fear through their bond, but also anger. Pyrex wanted to fight. "No," Taesung whispered in Korean. "You are still too young. You will get hurt," but Pyrex was not listening. The dragon had grown protective of Taesung over the weeks. Seeing him in danger triggered something deep in the dragon's instincts. Pyrex pulled away from Taesung's grip and launched into the air. The dragon flew straight at the attacking nobles, breathing fire hotter and more focused than Taesung had ever seen. The attackers scattered, their armor glowing red from the heat. Pyrex moved with incredible speed, diving and striking with claws that could now cut through metal. But there were too many of them. One of the nobles fired a weapon designed specifically to hurt dragons. The blast hit Pyrex's wing and the dragon fell from the air with a pained cry. Taesung ran forward without thinking. He reached Pyrex before the attackers could, scooping up the injured dragon and running back toward the defending guards. Pyrex was heavy now, much heavier than before, but Taesung carried the dragon anyway. Through their bond, Taesung could feel Pyrex's pain and frustration. The dragon wanted to keep fighting, but Taesung pushed his own thoughts through the connection. "Stay with me. We fight together or not at all." Pyrex calmed slightly, understanding. The palace guards managed to drive back the attackers temporarily, and they reached the safe room. It was a reinforced chamber deep in the palace interior, designed to protect the Emperor during emergencies. But when they arrived, they found the Emperor was already there. And he was wounded. Blood seeped from cuts on his arms and chest. His breathing was labored, but his eyes burned with fury. "They betrayed me," Emperor Vralmoth said. "Half my guard turned traitor. They have been planning this for weeks." Drextor was just the beginning. Haywan was there too, brought for safety because she was human. She immediately began treating the Emperor's wounds, though her hands shook with fear. "How many loyal guards remain?" the Emperor asked the commander. "Maybe a third of our forces, Your Majesty." The traitors control most of the ship. The Emperor's expression darkened. He looked at Taesung. They are doing this because of you. Because I honored Pyrex's choice. Because I elevated a human. Drextor's arrest was the spark. But the hatred has been building for months. Then let me leave, Taesung said. I will take Pyrex and go. If that stops the fighting, no. The Emperor's voice was firm. If I give in to this, I prove them right. I show that humans are expendable. The traditions matter more than honor. I will not do that. I will not make that mistake again. There was something in his voice. Old pain, old regret. Taesung realized the Emperor had faced this choice before, perhaps with his first dragon Kairos. And whatever choice he made back then, he regretted it. The battle raged for hours. Loyal forces fought traitors throughout the palace ship. Taesung stayed in the safe room with Pyrex, treating the dragon's wounded wing as best he could. The injury was not serious, but it would take time to heal. Through the walls, they could hear explosions and weapons fire. At one point, the traitors tried to breach the safe room. The Emperor himself fought at the door, his ancient strength and skill keeping them back. Taesung watched in awe as the Emperor moved like a warrior half his age, his combat experience from centuries of war showing in every movement. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the sounds of battle faded. The door opened and loyal guards entered. Their commander knelt before the Emperor. The traitors have been defeated, Your Majesty. Their leaders are dead or captured. The ship is secure. The Emperor nodded wearily. And the cost? Heavy, my lord. We lost many good soldiers today. Emperor Vralmoth closed his eyes briefly, grief crossing his face. Then he straightened. Gather the survivors. I will address the entire palace within the hour. When they emerged from the safe room, Taesung saw the damage. Corridors were scorched by weapons fire. Bodies of both traitors and loyal guards lay covered in sheets. The beautiful palace was scarred by battle. The Emperor called an emergency assembly. Everyone remaining in the palace was required to attend, from the highest nobles to the lowest servants. They gathered in the great hall, which was large enough to hold thousands. Emperor Vralmoth stood before them, still bearing his wounds, refusing medical treatment until after he spoke. Taesung stood beside him as the Emperor had requested. Pyrex was on his shoulder, the dragon's presence a statement in itself. Today, traitors tried to seize this palace. The Emperor began, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. They claimed to act for the honor of our species. They said I had become weak by honoring a bond between a human and a star dragon.